right. Thank you all for coming tonight. I recognize a few faces, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kristen Zemaitis. I began working with sea turtles in 2012 in Costa Rica, and I joined the Caretta Research Project just in 2023. So in between that time, I've been on Jekyll Island a bit, working with sea turtles as well as alligators. And I'm currently the education coordinator, PR coordinator, and a biologist with the Caretta Research Project. Chris Williams-Carroll is not here tonight. She's the other half and actually the backbone of the Caretta Research Project. She's been with them for 30 years now. So she first started with turtles back in 1996. And she is truly like the backbone of the Caretta Research Project. So I just wanted to give her a shout out to 30 years of this amazing conservation work. So Caretta is the scientific name of the loggerhead sea turtle. So if you were wondering what the Caretta Research Project is, you can think of it as the Loggerhead Sea Turtle Project. But this is one of our individuals that nests on Wassaw. So have you heard of Wassaw before? Raise your hand if you've heard. Okay, good, awesome. Lots of locals. So we are just south of Little Tybee and Skidaway there. If you have not been, that is because it's not accessible by road. You do have to have a boat to get there. And so before I dive into the Caretta Research Project and what we are, I do want to talk a little bit about Wassaw Island and the history of it. So this is supposed to be part of the Naturalist 101 series where we have a field trip that coincides with the lecture. Usually we would be out on Wassaw learning about the history, but because of some unfortunate flooding events this year, we're not going to be able to do the field trip. So I do want to touch base on that. Normally Fish and Wildlife would be here to talk about it. So originally, there were indigenous peoples on Wassaw Island. The discovery of artifacts dating back to AD of 500 to 600 revealed that the presence of indigenous people who likely used it for hunting and fishing. I did try to find photos of these artifacts, but I could not find any. So I'm going to continue hunting those down, but I think it'd be really interesting to learn more about that. And then the name Wassaw itself comes from the Creek word for sassafras, which is wezo. So sassafras is very commonly found on Wassaw Island, and that's originally where the name came from. The earliest ownership was actually from in the 1800s from Anthony Ottingsell. So he was a free black planter and fisherman. He inherited Little Wassaw Island from his former owner. And in an attempt to escape cholera, there's an epidemic in 1846. Over 300 enslaved African Americans were sent to Wassaw to either fight it out or quarantine, and unfortunately none of them have been recorded as making it. And so there is actually a mass grave on Wassaw. It is not marked. We have not been able to find it, but that is one of the earliest records of ownership was from Ottingsell. After that, during the Civil War, there was Confederate and Union troops both on the island. So an unmarked grave of a soldier was found with a .56 caliber bullet and some uniform buttons from the 1st Georgia Regiment, as well as cannonballs all along the north end of the island, which has shifted quite a bit since that time, but there have been cannonballs found. And then that leads us to the Parsons family legacy. So there are some buildings on Wassaw. You may or may not be aware if you've been there before or read about the Parsons, but this is George and Emily Parsons. Sarah Parsons, arriving on the dock in 1866. And so they're originally from Maine, and George bought Wassaw as a wedding gift for Sarah. So they then built a small compound with several homes on the island. They added to that over the years, and they built over 20 miles of roads throughout the island. Some of those you can still travel today. A little bit after that, we had Battery Morgan. So during the Spanish-American War in 1898, the Parsons permitted the construction of a gun battery on the very north end of Wassaw that would serve to protect the southern approach to the city of Savannah from the Spanish attack. This was later named after Lieutenant Henry Sims Morgan, who planned and supervised its construction, but died a hero several months later, attempting to rescue sailors on a grounded ship during a hurricane. So we actually have a couple of turtles who are named after Lieutenant Morgan as well. But this is kind of what it looked like a few years ago, and that's what it looks like now at low tide. Originally, it was very large. You could walk inside of it. It was up in the forest on the north end. We've had a lot of erosion. We've had a lot of hurricanes. And now at high tide, you can only see about this much of the tip of it sticking out. So the fort is mostly underwater these days, but if you do go to the north end, you can still see remnants of it. So then we have the refuge establishment. So it is now a national wildlife refuge. And in an effort to preserve the island in its natural state, the Parsons family and others formed the Wassaw Island Trust in 1930. They were really concerned that the state of Georgia would condemn the island in order to open it up for public use. And so before that was able to happen, they were able to negotiate with the Nature Conservancy, who then facilitated an agreement with the Fish and Wildlife Service that it would be preserved. And in 1969, the National Wildlife Refuge was officially established. So the stipulations are that the island would be preserved in its natural state. There would never be a bridge built to connect to the mainland, and that the trust would maintain its 180-acre inholding, which includes all the housing compounds and the members. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. You'll see kind of what life is like on Wassaw for us, but we do rent cabins from the family on their property. And then also part of this is that there is no building allowed on the island. So everything that was already there can be maintained, but there will be no additional building on the island. And so now we have the National Wildlife Refuge. This is a total of 10,070 acres of salt marsh, mudflats, forests, dunes, beach. It's very large. So you can see all of the green area here is actually the part of the refuge, but the island itself, the highland, is only this long, skinny part here. The white parcel that you see is the 180-acre compound that the Parsons family owns. So the rest of it is all fish and wildlife. So only about 2,500 acres of that is actually upland, dune, and beach. And the whole beach that we patrol for sea turtle nesting is 7 miles long. The island itself is only about a mile wide in some spots, maybe a little bit more, up to 2 miles, but it's pretty long and skinny. This is just a really nice aerial photo that I love of the north end. So Fort Morgan is actually up there. I don't have a pointer, but this is the sandbar that is also on the north end. And most barrier islands do have this sort of sandbar, dead tree forest happening, erosion on the north end, and we'll see some more photos of that. But so I'm going to transition now into the Caretta Research Project. What are we? What do we do? Why are we here? So our goals are to learn more about sea turtle reproductive biology. We also want to increase the survival rate of eggs and hatchlings, educate and involve the public, and contribute to research efforts. So we've been doing this since 1973. So we are on year 53 now. Some things that make us really unique, though, is that we are the longest continuously running saturation tagging program in the United States, possibly the world, for loggerhead sea turtles. And we are a volunteer-based program. So I'll talk a little bit more about both of those aspects. So one thing I want to point out is that we are the longest continuously run saturation tagging project. We are not the first. There were other people who started saturation or tagging. Projects may have started up and stopped and begun again throughout time, but we have the largest continuous data set. So I do want to acknowledge the other people who came before the Caretta Research Project who really started paying attention to the loggerhead population here on our Georgia coast. We have 1964 with Jim Richardson. He is now a retired University of Georgia ecologist. He first began monitoring nests on Little Cumberland Island. That's one of the farther south islands. Nest monitoring on Blackbeard was in 1966, Jekyll Island 1972, both Wassaw and then Carol Rectishell on Cumberland were in 1973. And then in 1989, the Department of Natural Resources began collecting data statewide. So that included all of the beaches along the Georgia coast, all 100 miles, all of the islands. And that was where the Georgia Sea Turtle Cooperative was born. And we'll talk more about that a little bit too. So the beginning of Caretta itself, the Caretta Research Project on Wassaw, was stimulated by the noticeable decline of sea turtle populations in the Northwest Atlantic and around the world. So fishermen mostly were talking to each other, naturalists were talking to each other, and they're seeing less turtles every year, fewer and fewer nests, fewer hatchlings. And so the Savannah Science Museum, which is no longer here, but it was originally just downtown in Savannah, was run then by Jerry Williamson. And then the Wassaw Island Trust, so this is a family member, Charlie Milmine, who also was really heavily involved with the museum, and Fish and Wildlife all founded the Caretta Research Project. So in 1972, they were talking about the decline. They really wanted to start monitoring the turtles and see what they could do about it. So the summer of 1973, they began monitoring loggerhead sea turtle population nesting on Wassaw by marking individuals. So that's the saturation tagging that I was talking about, and I'll show some photos of that in just a bit. But this is really a strategy that will yield demographic information that is critical for population recovery and management. So the questions we're asking really are, how many turtles are in our population each year? Is that increasing or decreasing? How many nests are being made each year? Is that increasing or decreasing? And then shortly thereafter, rigorous nest protection procedures were implemented. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But basically protecting the nests from predation or inundation from tides is a really great way to bolster the population into the future. So the Georgia Sea Turtle Cooperative is a part of the Georgia DNR run by 13 barrier islands. And really the goal of this is to maintain the viability of marine turtle populations in Georgia. But we're also part of the North Atlantic Recovery Unit, which includes Florida, the Carolinas, and now parts of Virginia. So all of the loggerhead sea turtles that nest along our Atlantic coast. And the goal is to have at least a 2% increase in populations and nesting throughout several years. So we have to see that along the entire coastline, not just Georgia's coast. All right, so real quick, this could be a whole another 45-minute lecture. What are some threats to sea turtles globally? Anybody? Fishing, poaching, erosion, sea level rise, pollution. Yes, all the things. Great. You guys are a great audience. We have beachfront development. We've got all the lighting that comes along with that. Here are some examples of where lighting has been mitigated, so people are listening and they are making an effort. We've got lots of commercial fishing. We've got nets, hooks, all kinds of things. Are you familiar with the trawler exclusion device or the TED, turtle exclusion device? So that's something that's been implemented in fishing. That's to exclude turtles and larger things like cannonball jellies from the shrimping nets. So that was implemented about 40 years ago, and it's been really, really successful. So then that leads me to my next point. Why do we care? Why do we need to protect sea turtles? What happens if they decline? So sea turtles are very important to the food web that they live in. They also are really important to ecosystems that are beyond just the ocean, so the beach as well. And we'll talk about the nourishment that happens on the beach. But they're essentially a keystone species. So they influence many other species within each of their food webs. And they also are really specific to the species. So each role, like a green sea turtle, maintains the seagrass beds, which is a really important nursery for a lot of species that breed there. Our leatherbacks are eating really large jellyfish at large rates, and that's helping our fisheries. So each species has a different role based on where it lives in the ocean and in the world and what it's eating. So I'm going to shift now a little bit to the Caretta Research Project and what it's like to volunteer and what we do. So we have had about 3,780 volunteers since 1973. This is an average of 85 to 102 per year, depending on how many slots we fill. And then this is anywhere from age 14 to 82. And actually, I think our oldest volunteer just turned 83. So there's a little bit of a competition there for who's going to be around the longest. We've had volunteers from all 50 states, 7 countries, and we have about a 45% repeat in volunteers. So there are lots of people who come once, love it, check it off their list, go on to something else, and then we have a group of people who have been coming for 20 plus years, and they come every summer. So it's a really great community. We've trained over 30 interns that are going into some sort of marine biology or ecology program. A lot of them spend anywhere from like 4 to 8 years with us, just working throughout college and training. And then we started a new teen outreach program where we are going into high schools, working with the teens to teach them lectures like this. And then they go in and work with the younger schools and give presentations to second graders and fourth graders. So we're trying to expand on the outreach that we have here in Savannah. So when you volunteer for the Caretta Research Project, I'm going to talk a little bit about what it looks like. So we have volunteer boat captains as well. We do not own our own boat for Caretta. And so each of these volunteer boat captains have volunteered their boat, their gas, their time, and they take all of our equipment out to the island. So we bring everything out there every single Saturday of the summer. We go May through August. So it's 17 weeks total. And if you volunteer, you are there for 1 week, 1 full week. So all the food we need, all the gear we need, laundry, everything comes out on that day to the federal dock. And then our accommodations are 2 cabins. So we have the main cabin where the biologists stay, and that has a big kitchen and a big dining room. and we kind of do all of our research analysis in there as well. We've got a lot of equipment. And then there's another volunteer cabin that has 8 bunk beds in it. So there's eight beds and enough for 6 people to be in there each week. We limit it to 6 because of our vehicle space. There is a cold outdoor shower, no electricity, some solar power, and an indoor toilet. So it's very rustic. I will add the bugs. If you're from Georgia, you all know that there's a lot of bugs. We then patrol 7 miles of beach each night on the Kawasaki mules. So it's a Kawasaki mule here. We have a couple of them. We basically split up into 2 teams, and we cover the 7 miles back and forth looking for sea turtles or tracks. And that is where the fun comes in, because then we get to collect all the data and do the saturation tagging. So this is a flipper tag. It's a little metal ink panel tag on kind of like the inside of the turtle's flipper that has a unique code on it. So each turtle has 2 of those, and some of these turtles have had these in for 40-some years, 50-some years. So it's really a great way to keep track of them, but they do come out. It's kind of like jewelry, like you lose earrings. So the other thing that we do is insert a pit tag, and that is basically a microchip that your cat or dog might get at the vet. It's the size of a grain of rice. It's really tiny. We can inject that under the skin, and that stays with them for their entire life as well. So if they are ever on a project that does have a pit tag scanner, they can figure out who the turtle is. And this is really important, again, for us knowing how many turtles are in the population. We're also, during this time, taking measurements. We're measuring the width and length of the turtle, as well as how wide their skulls are. And then we take biopsies. And so this could be, depending on the year and the research that we're doing or who we're collaborating with, sometimes little tiny skin samples. We take blood samples. We've taken swabs from the cloacal fluid on the eggs. We've taken eggshells, yolk and albumin. It just depends on the research. So we also take 1 egg for genetics from every single nest. And this is in combination with the University of Georgia's long-term genetics project. That allows us to then identify every single turtle in the entire North Atlantic region. And so other islands that do not do the saturation tagging, I should say, Jekyll Island and Wassaw are the only 2 that are out there at night. So we're actually encountering the females while they are nesting. All of the other beaches on the coast are just going out for a dawn patrol and looking for a nest. So they're not actually seeing the female. They don't know who laid it. But with this egg, we can then run the DNA. We know each individual female that's laying every single nest. This is really important because the life history of a loggerhead sea turtle is pretty unique. They don't reach sexual maturity until an average of 30 years. And they nest about every 2 to 4 years. So the average clutch size is about 120 eggs. Now this can vary from 80 to 180, but 120 is average. And they lay about 4 to 8 nests per season. Now, before we did any sort of saturation tagging or DNA work, we were seeing, say you say 1,000 nests this year on the coast of Georgia. They thought maybe that equals 1,000 turtles. We now know that 1 turtle can lay 8 eggs in 1 season, 8 nests in 1 season. And so that could be upwards of 1,000 eggs per individual turtle every year. So in 1 individual adult loggerhead is very important to the sustainability of the population. And then with that, it's estimated that about 1 in every 1,000 hatchlings will reach adulthood, but those numbers are changing. We're now saying somewhere closer to 1 in every 4,000 because of all the anthropogenic activity that's happening. So we have increased pollution, increased marine debris, increased fishing, increased lighting. So it's more like 1 in every 4,000. So 1 female could come up and lay 1,000 eggs, and not a single one of them will make it to adulthood. That's basically what that boils down to. I do have some fun videos if they will play on here. This is an adult female digging. And so I think a lot of people picture it like a dog going crazy in the sand, but they're really methodical. They use their rear flippers, and they go every other. And they actually have very dexterous flippers. They'll scoop sand out and kind of set it to the side. So you can kind of see her doing that here, just kind of scooting it. So this can take anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, depends on the turtle, depends on the sand. Sometimes they'll start over 8 times. And then this is a turtle actually laying. So you'll notice that her rear flippers are sort of flexing. That's every time that she's pushing eggs out. And this can take, again, anywhere from like 15 to 20 minutes, the actual laying of eggs. And so we are sometimes with turtles for a very long time. If it's a busy night, we'll go get as much data as we can from her and move on to the next one. But if it's a slow night, we could spend up to 2 hours with a turtle. After that, they're going to really delicately cover the nest. And so you'll see her covering the eggs. They actually really pat the sand in very hard to protect it from predators. And the eggs themselves are about the size of a ping pong, and they are really soft. So if you've never felt a reptile egg before, I kind of compare it to like your tennis shoe, how it's flexible, but it does protect your toes from harm. So they do have to drop about 45 to 60 centimeters into the nest chamber. So they're not hard like a chicken egg. They're not going to crack while they're falling in there. And then the last thing they do is camouflage. You'll notice this turtle does have a satellite tag on it as well. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but they do a really great job of throwing sand around and making it look like the nest is 10 feet away from where it actually is. So that sometimes makes our job difficult if we're not there to see the turtle laying. We have to find it, but it's a fun process. And then afterwards, we protect the nests. And so you may have seen something like this on one of the barrier islands or a different beach elsewhere. But we use these plastic screens, and these holes are only about this big, but they are big enough for a hatchling to get out of. So hatchlings can get out by themselves if a human is not there to assist, but it does keep the predators out. And so on Wassaw, some of the common predators we have are basically anything that can dig and anything that wants to eat a protein-rich egg. So we have armadillos, foxes, coyotes, raccoons, ghost crabs are really common. We do not have hogs on Wassaw, thankfully, but they are a really, really big issue in a lot of the other barrier islands, also especially. So we're very fortunate that we haven't had to deal with that because it requires a lot more effort to protect the nests. One thing I don't have up here are also fire ants. We have quite a few fire ants that will get hatchlings when they're really close to emerging. And this is just what's happening while they're either in the egg stage or hatching and getting to the ocean. So once they're in the ocean, it's a whole other ball game. And there's nothing we can do to protect them from there, but they do have quite a bit to get just off the beach. We will sometimes relocate nests, and so this is just some pictures of volunteers counting the eggs. If it's laid too close to the tide line and it has a risk of water washing over it, then we'll move it back farther into a dune. And then the incubation period takes about 55 days. This year we were actually seeing some of them closer to 49 days, so we have some warmer years. We do keep track of that. We have temperature loggers that keep track of the incubation of each nest as well. And then when they are ready, we call it a boil. And they all, 100 and some of them, come out together at the same time. And this can take anywhere from like 5 minutes to 20 minutes usually. It happens very fast, much faster than the nesting process. So they sort of use each other as a ladder to get out, and then they all make their way to the sea. And they're basically just looking for the reflection of light on the ocean to guide them. They don't have a mom there to tell them what to do. No one's really helping them. It's all just instinct. Here's just a really fun, cute video of them during the daytime. So we do excavations. Every nest that is laid, it gets dug up, and then we count how many eggs were laid, how many hatched, how many did not hatch. And then the eggs that do not hatch, we open up and look at the stage of development, and that can tell us a lot about the health of the turtle. So was the egg even fertilized? Are we seeing a lot of abnormalities? Deformations in flippers and heads, things like that, sometimes leucistic or albino hatchlings. So we're getting a lot of data from that. But we oftentimes will find live hatchlings that did not make it out of the nest, and so that's what this is from. Very cute. So on Wassaw, in the Caretta Research Project, we have had 2,197 individual turtles that we have documented since 1973. That's 6,450 nests and approaching 50,000 hatchlings. And we only, again, know this because we have meticulously surveyed every inch of that beach every single night and every single morning for 53 years, and then counted every single egg and every single hatchling that we find on that beach. So this is, due to all of the really dedicated biologists that started the program and have continued to work with it, but also to all of those volunteers who continuously come and help us collect this data. So we've contributed to data for the 2009 and 2019 recovery plans for the Northwest Atlantic loggerhead sea turtle population. We also provide a lot of data to support the infrastructure for publications, PhD dissertations, master's theses. And so because we are out there collecting all this data hands-on with the turtle, if someone comes to us and says, I really want to get, some blood samples this summer to look at this hormone in sea turtles, can you do that? And we say, absolutely. We're already touching the turtle. We'll do as much as we can. So it's really hard for people otherwise to get this huge data set. We've also authored 30 research presentations at 15 regional and international symposia. And my favorite slide is that, conservation really does work. So if you look, these are the number of turtles in yellow, number of nests in black from 1973. Now, early on, we had a lot of fishing, a lot of shrimping, trawling, things like that, and we had very, very low numbers. This is when they started to see, back here, they were kind of looking at how many turtles are we seeing, and it was getting lower and lower and lower. And you can see there's even a couple of dips where it gets severely low. There are years where they had maybe 20 nests on Wassaw and very long, very slow nights. So somewhere around here, we had the implementation of the TED, the turtle exclusion device, or the trawler exclusion device. And then we also had nest protection. Now, if you think about the life cycle of the loggerhead sea turtle, remember that it takes 30 years for them to reach sexual maturity. So it took us 30 years to see the progress of anything that happened way back here. And they just kept doing it. They didn't know if it was going to work. They were hoping it would, and thankfully it did. So they just stuck with it, and it was really, really worth it. One thing I want to point out is that there is a pretty big up and down trend, and that's normal. We see that for some reason here where we'll have a really, really high year of nesting and then maybe 2 or 3 slower years of nesting. And that could be due to them syncing up. So there's a cycle of every 2 to 4 years they're nesting. Lots of them are on a 3-year cycle. And it also has a lot to do with the food availability. And so if you think about a loggerhead sea turtle laying 8 nests with 120 eggs in each nest, that's a lot of energy that she used to produce that many eggs. And so beginning of the season, they are really healthy, big turtles. They're sort of bulging out of their shells. By the end of the season, they are sunken in. They have lost so much weight from all of the egg production. And so they need those 2 to 3 years then to go and eat. They just go forage, and they need to stock up to then be able to nest again. So when we see these dips, it's likely due to them just not having enough food available. And this year, we were supposed to see a really big increase. So we've had 2 really slow years. We were expecting a really big year. And this year was actually much lower than the last 2 years. So not sure what's happening there. We're hoping for a really big year next year. We'll just see what happens. But it is part of the natural cycle for the loggerheads. I have just some quick fun facts about other species that we've seen on Wassaw. So we have had 8 individual green sea turtles, and one of them was this year. And they've laid a total of 16 nests. 2 of them were this summer. They both hatched out. And we've had 561 green hatchlings leave our beach. We've had 2 individual leatherbacks. It's been a really long time since we've seen a leatherback, but they did lay 2 nests with a total of 63 hatchlings. These are the largest. So if you saw the other skull that's on the table when you walk in, that's the largest of all the sea turtles. They are compared sometimes to like a slug bug car. They can be over 9 feet long and weigh over 4,000 pounds. So very, very large. The Kemp's Ridley is the smallest and most endangered of all the sea turtles. We've had 1 Kemp's come onto our beach, and we had 36 hatchlings produced from that. They are smaller. They do lay a smaller number of eggs. And we have a very special hybrid loggerhead Kemp's. Her name is Miles. She is the only one in existence besides one other possible male that we've detected using DNA. So she is a Wassaw girl through and through. She's only nested on Wassaw for the past several years. She comes every 2 years. Last year she was here, so this summer we did not see her. But she is a little bit smaller than a loggerhead. So here's a loggerhead, and here's a Kemp's, and here's a hybrid during the day. So Kemp's Ridleys nest during the day. Oftentimes they'll do what they call an arrabata, where they're all nest together in large groups. And then loggerheads nest only at night. So our hybrid does both. She sometimes comes up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she sometimes comes up in the middle of the day when we're all sleeping and we miss her. So thank goodness for the DNA, we're able to still figure out who's laying each nest. So she's been here in 2018, 2022, and 2024, and then during the day in 2020. And then we've had confirmed 12 nests. Again, she is the only hybrid, I think, ever documented. For sure in Georgia, but we've gone to some symposia now, and we haven't heard anyone else mentioned this hybrid. There are some green hybrids of other species, but not a loggerhead kemps. This is just a really fun photo of the hatchlings. And so this is a normal loggerhead on the side there, and then this is our hybrid. So it's a little bit smaller. You can see the head's a little bit skinnier. It's not a huge difference because they are very small hatchlings, but when we measure them, they're about 1 centimeter off on all measurements, which is significant for something that's only 4 centimeters long. So that's what the hybrids look like. And then we have a lot of collaborations. And so this is an area that I would love to go into more detail on if we have time, which we probably will not. But if this is something you're interested in, I'd be happy to talk with you more about it after the presentation or at a different time. But we are constantly collaborating on very large research projects on Wassaw. And so one of them I mentioned earlier was the University of Georgia's research with genetics. So we are taking a skin sample from all of our females, and it's just from like kind of the fatty area of her shoulder. And then we're taking blood samples sometimes and that egg. And so that allows us to figure out how many individual females are nesting on the coast and what our population is doing. Now from that, we've also been able to look at family trees. And so there are some, it's really hard to age a turtle, right? So we think that the first time we see her and tag her, she could be 30, but she could have also been nesting in Florida or on a different beach for 20 years before we saw her. So it's really hard to age them. But using genetics, we have found mothers and grandmothers that are also nesting. And so if a grandmother is nesting and her granddaughter is nesting, that puts her at least 90. If not more. And so we really do not know the true age limit of sea turtles at this point. It could be a lot more than we really realize. And the other thing is that reptiles don't experience senescence. So they don't go through menopause. They don't slow down and stop reproducing. As long as they have enough fat on their body to produce eggs, they will continue to do so until they wither away. So they could be reproducing well into their hundreds at this point. So that's a really awesome project. And it's really fun to see some of our mothers and daughters that are still coming back to Wassaw. So, you know, there's myths about turtles coming back to the exact spot they were born to nest, and that does occasionally happen, but more often than not, it is a little bit off. So the magnetic field of the Earth shifts a couple degrees every couple of years. So what it is today for our hatchlings will not be the same 30 years from now. So a Wassaw turtle might find itself in Florida or North Carolina. It's hard to say. But eventually, using the magnetic field of the Earth and migration skills, they may end up back on Wassaw. It might just take them an extra 10 years before they figure out exactly where they are. We're finding now that some turtles and some lineages are really, really good at migration and navigating, and others are not. So we might have a turtle that nests in Florida, and then Georgia, and then South Carolina, and then North Carolina every single summer. She's just moving around a lot, really not sure of where she wants to be. And then others on Wassaw, we have several that have come for 40, 50 years, and they're there every single cycle, every single nest. All 7 or 8 of them are laid on Wassaw. We even have some that are so specific, and these are the older turtles where it's always in the boneyard on the north end or always on the tip of the south end. And so some of them are very specific. The University of Florida, we are working with them on a really big nutrition study. So this started several years ago, where we were taking skin samples to look at what the turtles were eating. So everything that you eat gets incorporated into your body somehow. And we're able to look at what the isotopes were saying. So basically, where did they eat, what did they eat, and how long ago did they eat it? Now we are really concerned about their foraging grounds. So what do we need to do to protect these areas? Where are they spending most of their time eating? And we're using this in conjunction with our satellite tagging project, which I'll talk about in just a second. But a combination of skin samples, and then when we take that egg for the genetics project, we keep the egg shell for the mother's genetics, but the yolk and albumin would typically be discarded. We don't need that for anything. So we actually kept that for the University of Florida. We separated it, and they can then look at what part of the female's diet was used to make the yolk and the albumin. And so part of the question is, are they making these eggs months in advance, or are they making them in real time? And are they foraging in between nesting? So it's about every 2 weeks that they're coming onto the beach to nest. Are they eating in between that time? And all the data suggests that they are not eating at all during that entire summer months where they are nesting. Anytime we find a stranding, like a sea turtle, an adult female that's been hit by a boat, we do a necropsy. And more often than not, there's nothing in any of their digestive system. So looking at then the blood. So the blood tells us a lot about what, how much protein you have, how many sugars are in your blood, when's the last time you had a good meal. So we're looking at the blood and the eggs to figure out what these females are using to really get through the season and how they're producing all of these eggs. That is super new data. It's not all processed yet, but I can tell you from the preliminary data, based on observation, seeing these really healthy females in the summer with really, really great blood values, and then at the end of the summer having really, really low blood values, I don't think that they are likely eating very much at all during the nesting season. And so then we need to figure out where they're going and where they're eating and what they're eating and how we can protect that. The Georgia Southern University is also looking at temperature data. So I mentioned that we have data loggers that go in each nest. These record the temperature during incubation. This is very important because sea turtles do have temperature-dependent sex determination. So a higher temperature will produce females, a lower temperature will produce males. We do have some years that are nice and cool. We have other years where it's very, very hot. And globally, we are seeing evidence of climate change where we're getting hotter and hotter and hotter, producing more females. So feminization of an entire population could be really bad for future reproduction and future genetics. So we do want to make sure that we're keeping track of that we're not having only females produced. In other areas closer to the equator, they are seeing that more commonly. They're having to resort to shade cloth, watering their nests, moving them to nurseries, things like that. So we're still sitting in good, pretty good spot here in Georgia, but it could happen. So we want to make sure we're keeping track of that. And we are on, I think, year 15 or 16 of monitoring that continuously. And we actually started it about 30 years ago. So that's great data to have as well. Here are some of our satellite tag turtles from 2023. So all of the turtles are on the Sea Turtle Conservancy website and the OSearch shark tracking app, if you're familiar with that. You can go online for free and follow our turtles and see where they're going. It's really fun. I like to pull it up in classrooms often. But we had Caroline down here and Buffett up there, both tagged in 2023. This is kind of just a fun anecdotal story about Caroline. So we know this from genetics. And this was pure luck. We just picked the first turtle that came up that night and said, you're getting a satellite tag. She turns out has she's a part of a large family group. So she has a mom that was actually tagged on Wassaw in 1996. So she's part of that lineage where they are coming back to the same spot to nest. She also has three now. We just found out there's a third, 3 full sisters that are nesting on Wassaw and Sapelo. So really, really close proximity to Wassaw. Now, having a full sister is a big deal because remember we said it's like 1 in 4,000 that actually make it. And turtles can have multiple paternities. So we have found up to 7 fathers for one nest. So they will mate early in the season and they will hold on to sperm and they will not mate again for months. And so the fact that we have full sisters, 4 of them now that are reproducing around the same age, that suggests a really, really strong bloodline, really, really great genetics. And then there are other turtles who might not ever have any of their offspring reached sexual maturity. So that was really cool to see. The sad part of the story is that Caroline's mom disappeared for 12 years. We didn't see her, so we thought maybe she was done nesting. And she came back, but both of her rear flippers were lame. So she had a boat incident where it had sliced through probably as part of her spinal cord, and neither of her rear flippers work. So she has come up multiple years in a row and tried to nest unsuccessfully. She just can't dig anymore, but she is still full of eggs, and eventually they just have to drop them in the ocean if they can't get them out in time. But so, this could be potentially Caroline and her 3 sisters, part of the last bloodline from their mom, which has really good genetics. So it's just really interesting. And we only, again, know that because of all of the, 30 plus years of data collection on genetics. So that was really cool to see. These are 3 turtles that we satellite tagged this summer. So the satellite tags should last about 2 years, give or take, depending on the condition of them. But these are 3 new turtles this year. We have Wassaw Will. Wassaw Will is in the Tour de Turtles on the Sea Turtle Conservancy website. If you go to the Caretta Research Project Facebook or Instagram, you can follow along with that. It's just a competition on which turtle travels the farthest, and she's winning. So she's way up in Delaware right now. She's got the most miles. And then we've got Keegan and Lillian. So all great turtles. All of our named turtles are adopted and named by someone who paid to adopt them. It's usually volunteers. Anybody can adopt them. It's on our website. So if that's something you're interested in for yourself or a loved one, you can do that. But they are all females, despite having masculine names. They are all female nesting turtles. One thing that I wanted to touch on before we go to questions is how our season went this year. So we had a really great nesting season, but we did have a pretty big setback, and this is why we can't do the field trip that I mentioned. So we have extreme flooding happening right now on Wassaw, and I think Wassaw and a couple of the other islands are seeing this as well. And so basically the ground is fully saturated like a sponge. It's groundwater coming up, and then first 2 weeks of August, you might remember, we had a ton of rain. We had 16 inches and then 4 inches and then 10 inches. So these are roads that we normally would drive with our vehicles, and in some spots it's 4 feet deep, so we cannot traverse them with our vehicles. We had to evacuate the island twice during the first 2 weeks of August when we normally would be out there for the full month. It was unsafe to be there. We didn't have plumbing. This is our access to the beach. This is actually flowing, moving water. This is our cabin, or the little makeshift bridge that floated away. This is another one of the cabin. This is about a 3.5 to 4 foot bench that's fully underwater there. And then our septic tank floated out of the ground. So we had to evacuate because we didn't have restrooms for 8 people. So we went back out, and 2 spots on the north end of the island have broken through the dune system. So this is water trying to basically escape the island and find somewhere to go. Out into the ocean to a low point. It broke through, and then we had a hurricane come through, and we had really big tides and really big storms. And so salt water is actually going back into the forest now at high tide. And so a lot of these plants are going to be very unhappy. It's really going to alter the landscape quite a bit. This is an area where we would normally see really nice dunes, lots of nests. We can't drive vehicles on the beach in this area anymore, so our 7-mile stretch is being altered. This is the federal dock, the access point that is open to the public at the Fish and Wildlife dock. It's hard to tell here, but this is a very, very large gully, essentially. It's about 2 of our vehicles stacked on top of each other, and the tide just comes in here now every day, and it goes all the way up the road to the cabin and then comes back out. So this is probably going to all wash away. Hopefully the cabin's okay where it is now, but the road's going to have to be rerouted. So if you were thinking of going to walk Pavilion Trail or visit Wassaw, I would not dock here. And Pavilion Trail is also underwater. You can, however, still go to North End or South End on the sandbars and beach for the day. So it's really put a lot of stress on our project, and we have seen some poor hatching success as a result as well. So with all that rain, it actually flooded a lot of the nests, and the rainwater, the groundwater is coming up. So even on dunes where it's high and dry and it looks like nice, beautiful white sand, you dig in about this far and there's already water just like bubbling up. So we did see quite a few deaths of hatchlings those first 2 weeks. Many of them were about to emerge. And then now we're still just seeing rotten eggs. So July was amazing. We had a really, really great success for hatchlings. One of the best we've ever seen. And then August has been one of the worst we've ever seen. In the 30 years of Chris being the director and Mark Dodd being with DNR, they have not seen anything like this happen. So it is pretty serious. So we have right now about a 39% success rate on our beach, and normally it's closer to 60. So the last 2 years it's been 57. A couple years it's been up in the high 60s. So it's a low year, but this is part of nature. This happens. Turtles have a nesting strategy, so maybe there's a reason that our large population didn't show up this year. Maybe next year will be a really great dry season and we'll have 800 nests. I don't know. But we ended up having about 82 individual females on Wassaw this summer. That resulted in 168 nests compared to last year was 267. So a little bit low. In situ just means that we left them where they were put by the female is 111, and then we relocated about 33% or 34% of those. Left incubating right now, it's actually only 8. So yesterday I was out there, we dug up a bunch more of the nests, and we're down to just 8 that are left out there. And we lost a couple, about 13 or 14 of them to tides. So we had those big storms. They got washed away, but otherwise, it's been a decent hatching. And false crawls, that's actually just turtles that come up and don't nest. So that happens often. We'll see a turtle 8 times in a week and she'll nest once. So sometimes they just can't find the right spot, whatever it may be. They get spooked by something. But those are kind of our end of the season stats for Wassaw. And then I just want to end on what you could do to help sea turtles in our state or along our coast. So you could participate with the Caretta Research Project. If this is something that appeals to you or someone you know, you can absolutely volunteer and sign up to join us on Wassaw. Sign-ups start in early sign-ups in December, but the usual registration will be January 2nd. And it does fill up very fast. About 75% of those spots are full on January 2nd. So if it's something you're interested in, get a head start on looking into it. You can also volunteer as a boat captain. If you are local to the area and you have a boat, you can help bring supplies and volunteers back and forth to the island. You can also educate people on the beach. You can talk about pollution. You can talk about what to do with fishing hooks, with lighting. Don't use white light during nesting season. Fill in your holes. If you're knocking down sandcastles, things like that, anything that could obstruct a sea turtle. If you do find a nest or even a stranded turtle that's injured in the water or on the beach, you can call the Department of Natural Resources. It's 1-800-2-SAVE-ME. You can look it up on your phone. It's super easy to find, but always report an injured or dead sea turtle. You can help with beach cleanups. Clean Coast is a really great program that organizes beach cleanups if you're interested in that. And then also, if you are a boater, if you know a boater, just always beware of turtles in the water. They do breathe oxygen. They do have to come up to take breaths, and we do see a lot of boat strike injuries. So just paying attention to your surroundings is really, really helpful. And with that, I think we are running out of time. So I wanted to just thank you all for being here and listening to me talk about turtles. And if you have any questions, I am happy to answer them. Yeah.
You wait 3 days to excavate?
Yes. It used to be 5. It's 3 now. And that is actually because we are now trying to get more information on paternity. So we have all this information on the moms. We don't know anything about the males. They never come out of the ocean. They spend their entire life at sea. We don't even have their DNA. And so if we do find eggs with embryos in them that have not hatched, that have been fertilized, we can actually take that. Or if we find a dead hatchling that maybe didn't make it out or was attacked by a ghost crab, we can take a skin sample from them, and that is helping us learn more about how many males are in the population, because we don't know. With feminization, it could be very few. So, yeah, good question.
How bad has the erosion been on other nesting sites outside of Wassaw?
On other sites, I know Ossabaw is pretty bad. Sapelo is always, experiencing flooding. I think some of the other islands like Jekyll and Cumberland that are farther south are okay. They have bigger dunes. They have a little bit more to work with. Barrier islands are supposed to erode on the north end and accrete on the south end. We do not really see that on Wassaw. We are basically eroding on both ends. A lot of that is probably due to dredging that's happening. A little bit north of us, they're taking all that sediment out of the rivers and putting it on other beaches, so we're not getting the sediment that we should be. Yeah, the whole coast, it was low. We were all expecting really big numbers, and everyone is lower than last year. So we'll see what next year brings.
What would happen if you were to lose the cottages on what would happen?
I don't know. That's a really good question. It's, the trust says no building for a reason, because they want to keep it very natural. But if their buildings were lost, I'm not sure. It's a good question. I think we'll just have to take it one day at a time. But if we don't have somewhere to stay, we can't continue to operate. And that's, we want to keep that 53, 54 74 years of data going, so hopefully we'll still be there. Any other questions?
And what was the age limit, the youngest?
You can come out if you are 14 with an adult. You can come out if you are 15 without an adult, but it's not summer camp. It is, we are there to work. So, but yeah, we have some really great teenagers who come out. We have a lot of young adults who are looking into going into biology and want to see what field work is like. And then we get people who just love turtles and never want to do biology, but they just want to be with the turtles. So it's a really good mix of people. And we accommodate everyone as best we can. Yeah.
How does that work? Do you just go out for a week?
Yep. When you register, it's a full week. It's Saturday to Saturday. Some people come out for 3 weeks. I mean, you can stay as long as you want. You can come once in hatching season and once in nesting season. You can choose your dates, but it's 1 full week. And we are out there all night during nesting season. We sleep during the day. Hatching season's a little bit more lax. We're spending a lot less time on the beach at night and more time up and about doing things on the island during the day, but it's also hotter, so there's some trade-offs.